hobby, my interest is the evolution of El Dorado Hills. I learned a little bit about the visionary guy who thought all this up, and then as I learned a little bit more, I realized what his plan was for the place, which didn't pan out, and we'll see why, because it's really like this utopian vision of this idealistic place that probably wasn't realistic, I don't know, but it's a cool vision. He hired the best people in the industry, in the world, actually, and they are in that framed thing in the back. We're going to walk this up here just to recognize them and to recognize the really cool flea market frame I got for a few bucks. So they had this, this is sort of like that famous picture of Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and Johnny Cash that never really happened. So this meeting never really happened, but these are the master architects of this place called El Dorado Hills. Alan Lindsay is front and center there, and the other ones were all notables in their field, everything from real estate to public relations to all sorts of land use specialties that I didn't even know existed, and Robert Trent Jones Sr. For the golf course. He's one of these guys. So that's what the original idea was, and the mastermind behind the overall plan was a guy who I'm even more fascinated with. This is a real burden. His name is Victor Gruen, and his story is just, I'm going to do it in August. We're dark in July, do it in August, but throughout the 1940s and 50s, he was the leading architect land use planner in the world. He was on the cover of major magazines every year. Very eccentric, very outspoken, crazy ideas, he didn't care. And so much of his thinking is here in El Dorado Hills, remains here today, underneath the surface a little bit, as the original plan, which turned out not to be viable simply because it was all premised on all these great white-collar jobs right down the freeway at Aerojet. It wasn't McDonnell Douglas, it was just Douglas then, right? And McClellan, and I think one other. And so one of those guys in the picture that did the projections, that all these things were just going to explode and triple in the number of jobs, that guy didn't do his homework, or didn't have the right crystal ball that day or something, because that all started going the wrong way like 2 weeks after they opened. I mean, it was just barely started, and things started going the other way. And we've got some people here that were at Aerojet at that time that might clarify that for me. But nonetheless, it had a lot of good mojo, and it did okay. We'll see some of the newspaper clippings and some of the stuff in my presentation. But basically, somehow or another, this guy, Victor Gruen, he wrote a number of books. Here's 2 of them. And the concepts in here about what cities should be, and this was supposed to be a city of 75,000 people. He envisioned the ideal size for a city to be 500,000 people, which Sacramento was at that point. And so his theory was that the appropriate thing is for there to be these outlying communities that are more or less self-sustaining, that stand on their own and don't contribute to the clutter of the big place, but have their own less clutter, I guess. And he went on to do a lot of stuff. He went and redesigned downtown Fresno, and there's a couple videos on YouTube if you care. You can see them. They're pretty interesting about what he did there to get the cars out. It's all, he's way ahead of his time. It's all about environment, automotive, minimizing automotive, taking care of the environment, and respecting the landscape. In El Dorado Hills, he had another aspect to it, and that is a huge recreation emphasis. So number 1 was honoring the landscape. So, the trees they had to kill to make a golf course, for example, some of them, full-grown oak trees, got uprooted and replanted along El Dorado Hills Boulevard, which I don't see any of them anymore, which sort of tells you how well that experiment worked. But stuff like that, I mean, they were going to great expense to do things like that, to honor the terrain. And so one of the things that some of the people that follow land use around here are the most frustrated at Parker development about is the fact that they built on the ridge top over here. That was not in the master plan. Everything was supposed to be like Ridgeview is. so that when you look at the ridge, you see the ridge and trees. So anyway, somehow we got, and I would love to know the answer to this, and so I've done some contacts. Victor Gruen's company, Victor Gruen Associates, still exists in Los Angeles. At the time, you had this hoity-toity Beverly Hills address. I don't know what it's like now. I've sent them email through their website, and they have not responded, but I would love to get them here in July to give us their perspective. But we got from his theories to this practice, the original, this is one version of the original marketing brochure for Dorado Hills. So, and you can see a lot of his ideas here, but then there's a lot of other things that you don't see. For example, circulation. He had very new, innovative ideas for ring traffic loops and stuff, which made sense in big urban cities, but I don't know that they really played out here outside of that context. But that's all next time. Let's see where we're at here. All right. There's the dream team. This is one of the 1963, oh, that's blurry. One of the 1963 press releases that this Randy company, they were some big deal in press relations. Recreational individualism. This is called creative marketing semantics. I don't think that term existed. They just made it up. And what it means is a place where everybody can do their own thing, essentially. So this is 1963, and people weren't even saying things like do your own thing for another several years. So you can see that we're already ahead of ourselves. And there's a whole series of these press releases. And as a writer, the prose is just delicious. I mean, they're really well crafted, and I mean, you can make up your own phrases, but you better be good at it, And so recreational industry, I like that one. Gruen's plan combined city, village, and resort life in a combination of 12 relatively autonomous villages. So, of course, those villages later on had to play into something called an area plan. That was the predecessor to modern-day general plans. And when it came time to say, what's a village in the area plan, there was a lot of discussions because the people that owned the property and wanted to develop it did not want to be constrained by this crazy Austrian's vision of what a village should be. And actually our own, I don't know if any of you know Harriet Siegel, but she was the head, at least for a period, of the advisory committee for the area plan and had to grapple with what a village should be. And the development community staunchly disagreed with some of their assumptions. But what I also squeezed in here, I don't know, maybe I got that on another one. The 12 original villages, darn, I lost that now. Oh, no, here it is. Got hidden. There was 12 original villages. They all had their own recreation. And the names of them are way in the back, along with which recreation each one had. Most actually were to have their own club or clubhouse of some sort. So the archers would have a formal clubhouse, just like golf has a clubhouse. Pretty pictures. And the Fish and Hunt Club, the Riding Club. The Riding Club was in Garden Village in the northern portion of Dorado Hills, Mountain Village in the southern portion because of the natural characteristics of the terrain. The opportunities for developing riding trails on the bands of permanent open space and of establishing riding stables, secluded locations, blah, blah, blah. Now, some of this, if you follow local land use, is starting to sound a little bit familiar because we're actually getting some of these same promises out of Parker Development in Marble Valley. They're doing some of the, I don't think, they're probably have long since forgotten. They were in this plan as well, but they're good ideas and they're good things to do. Now in this case, I'll just shortcut to you. Lindsay is gone by 1970. I already mentioned that things started going south. He hangs on. He has to bring in a big investor, $14.5 million in '64 already. He's got to get a huge multi-million-dollar investment. $14 million in 1964 dollars, right? That's a lot of money. By Hancock Insurance. His original, I plowed through the financial documents, it's confusing as hell, but there's all sorts of coming and going with regard to who's in on the project financially. The Hale brothers of Weinstock were the original big partners. Lindsay had done a really pioneering planned community called Lyndale in South Sac. I do not know how that panned out, but given the location. But at the time it was called the Victory. They went on to go commercial, and they did Sunrise Mall. And they rode on the coattails of that and did El Dorado Hills together. But something happened, I don't know what, and Hale brothers got cold feet. I know this from interviews with Alan Lindsay, who's now been dead for quite a while, but he was interviewed about every 10 years or so with the local media, and I've now found enough of those articles where he explained that we parted ways. The Hale brothers kept Lyndale and Sunrise Mall, and Lindsay kept El Dorado Hills. So that's how Alan Lindsay ends up here. So there's a lot of recreation built in. It's talked about extensively in all this marketing material that you can see. These are all pages out of this book or similar ones that blew up. Here's an advertisement that they took out. That's Robert Trent Jones. This is 1963, and they're saying, do you recall what we promised this man? This man would do for you. On Channel 3 last winter, we talked about a course the local golfers would soon enjoy in El Dorado Hills thanks to this man's unique talent and experience. And if I remember right, somewhere around 6 a.m., I put that in there. The first course at El Dorado Hills will be open for you to play. When it's ready, you'll see how well another promise has been kept in El Dorado Hills. You'll find this course a pleasure to play. It's challenging, it's short enough to permit you to play a full 18 holes after work. Watch for the opening of the first course in El Dorado Hills. Come out today, and while you're at it, look at our houses. The irony of boasting about promises kept in El Dorado Hills would be realized a few years later when all the rest of the recreational amenities went in the toilet. Not completely, though, because we got archery that was put in at the same time. You see 62, we're not quite there yet. A big year for El Dorado Hills. The golf course is begun and almost completed. The driving range actually opens in December. El Dorado Hills Boulevard goes in. The first residents move in. And the Sunset. Lindsay manages a partnership with Sunset Magazine. This is great fodder for another entire presentation, especially if we get the all current owners here who are architects and could probably speak to the architecture. The brief story of Sunset House, for those of you that don't know, it was a showcase of a different style of modern living, very modular in many ways. I don't know intentionally or what, but it actually reflected the Gruen plan for El Dorado Hills. It was a set of, instead of villages, he had these little modules that connected by open-air walkways. And it's still sitting there looking real innocuous in, that's Governor's Village, yeah, Governor's Village. But for the first couple of years, it was open to the public. There was public meetings here. Larry, didn't you say you used to have a regular meeting there of some sort?
Oh, I don't know about part of that, but I do know we went through it.
Yeah, it was open to the public when Sunset still had it. It was open for tours on the weekend, and donations went to a charity, one of the hospitals, I think. And then eventually they sold it. And they were basically trying to see if they were testing the waters to get into the development business themselves. So you could buy plans for one of these, and apparently they built one in Vail and some other really high-profile, very Tony locations. But that's a great subject for another day.
Where is it located? The Sunset House right now.
It's a Governor's Village.
It's a Governor's Village. You drive, well, you go in, the stop sign, you turn left, and I think it's the first left you turn, and it's set kind of on a hill. And it was open to the public for I don't know how many years. I remember going through just like Larry, but then they sold it.
Yeah, they sold it.
Yeah,
it changed hands.
The title on it, but it was such just like a model home. That's what it was.
Yeah,
it's a model home. They had all kinds of neat things in there that were quote innovative.
Yeah, the future, yeah.
That my wife wanted me to spend more money on, which was interesting.
Another Viennese architect, Heinrich Ball, was the architect. I don't know if anybody remembers the longtime theater critic for the Village Life, Dave Jacobson. Jacobson? Anyway, his daughter got to know Heinrich Ball, and it was documented pretty thoroughly in a series of Village Life articles over the years, including even one when I was there, so I kind of followed it. It's a great story. Here's the first residence. I think, speaking of Ball, I thought it was another Ball was the first resident, but in late 62, Di Giorgia, Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Di Giorgia, sorry that's a bad copy. But they moved in late 62. I don't know where, nobody knows them. This might have been staged for the press, because Clem Ball swears he was the first one in early 63, but here it was in the Mountain Democrat, so it must be true.
I don't know if it's the same one. It was the Georgians. He was the real estate. He was the salesman for Crown Village. And that's who we bought our home from.
So you bought your home from this guy.
And then he moved into Crown Village. But I knew he had lived here at that time, and he was like the guy that was here.
Yeah.
If you wanted to see somebody about Dorado Hills, you would bring that number, because if the office wasn't open.
Yeah.
So he was.
Yeah, and who knows? So if he was in the organization, maybe this was a little bit staged. I don't know. And sorry, it's grainy enough that I can't even read it on my screen. I've probably got a cleaner copy someplace else. This is other just stuff from 62. Here's the line of visitors on a typical weekend to the Sunset Magazine Discovery House. Also, this says bonds were issued for the pool, basically. Other recreation amenities soon followed. And I don't know, maybe they happened at the same time. The Archers are going to talk to us in a minute. They've got a scrapbook. As soon as I just bang through this, I'll get them to tell us what they know. You see, what year are we? This is 64. You guys, you know when it happened?
I joined in 64.
I joined in late 64 or early 65.
Yeah. And now it already existed someplace else, and you were given a new home, right? Is that the way that played
I
out?
think the club moved here in 62, I think. 62 or 63.
Yeah.
A year or two before I became a member.
Yeah, because there's a lot less infrastructure for an archery range than there is for a swimming pool, so I would imagine in the interest of bragging about stuff that's already here, in some of the other Lindsay interviews, he talks about how challenging it was getting people here when there was nothing here, especially no retail stores. But that's why they did the pool and the golf course so early, because they just wanted there to be something here. We got archers, we got tournaments, we got instruction, all sorts of stuff. And then we had, what's this, other stuff. Sorry, that's an ugly slide. Pinochle clubs are forming. The CSD starts to publish The Voice of the Village in 63. So we've now got a vehicle to invite people to see if anybody wants to play bridge, softball. St. Stephen's Church opens. That's the one that's right here on Dorado Hills Boulevard. They open early on and they start hosting social events. So these are all things to do. The newcomers and the bridge players, and we've got some of each here, or spouse of some of each. They're also using the Village Life to get the word out. And here we see, I think this is 64. The newcomers are already doing luau's and fashion shows. Those girls, there's just no holding them down. And of course, they're still going strong. A lot of the recreation revolved around kids. With so many young families here, that was to be expected. And we spent, in the last couple of these meetings, we spent a lot of time talking about that, so I didn't emphasize it in this one. But here's some big to-do in Governor's Village. And here's the garden club on the left, planting the exotic ginkgo biloba. Oh, this is the one where none of them got their first names in the paper. They're all Mrs. Louis M. Corbell, president of the club, surrounded by members. Mrs. Thomas Sutherland. Yeah. Anyway, the rest of the members are earlier in the thing. But in terms of what I see now, looking back mainly at old Voice of the Village, it was called, today it's called the Village Life, but it was golf, 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 golf. And there was a pro here. It was apparently a lovely course. I'd like to hear if it really was as lovely as it's described to be. It sounds like it was really nice. Not real challenging, but had a lot of character. Men's and women's clubs are forming. I don't see any kids' clubs forming, but maybe that came later. And lastly, the fire department forms, and that's a big deal. You know, everybody's worried about fire. Even then, there was nothing here. So they had to get critical mass signed up for a volunteer fire department. And Dennis Ferguson has talked about that. He was out pounding the pavement. He was the Rayleigh store manager, and he was trying to get people in, get them signed up. And right away, that became a big hub of social activity and recreation. I just picked a few of them off here. An open house, the first Firemen's Association forms in 64. And yeah, they had to get a certain critical mass of membership before they could qualify for some state funding for equipment. The balance of the promise, that's reflected in these posters up here. Well, we got the pool. We didn't really get the equestrian. Oh, there's equestrian property here. And fishing, okay, Folsom Lake, we got fishing. Tennis, we've been under tennis forever. We finally got some tennis courts. I think is that Park Weisberg Park? There's a little park over there in...
Under the power lines, the
Yeah.
tennis courts are named after one of the directors.
Yeah. And golf, sailing. I was hoping to attract some Camellia Cup veterans, but I don't think we did. Cluster plan. That was the idea. These would be urban clusters outside the major urban area. And early on, they were just boasting all that recreation. Oops. Sailing was mentioned a lot, is one of the big draws to the community. How about the golf course? Wayne, I know as a reporter I followed you making some pretty passionate speeches publicly about trying to save it. And you know, I really don't want to get into politics of that, but what did that thing mean to you, and what was it like?
Well, the golf course, in fact, Park Court, whatever, just reminiscing. Saturdays, the Odd Fellows had a group from the Trove that would come up, and we'd start at sunup. And as I was telling him, the first couple of holes, I never really knew what they looked like because it was so dark. But we'd go down there and play on Saturdays, and it was, when you say the course, I mean, what's one of the reasons when I bought my lot, which is right overlooking the course, and Alan Lindsay sold it to me, and he took me down, as it mentions in here, to the St. Andrews, and said, oh, my championship course is going over there, of course.
Okay, so backfill us. I don't think I mentioned the promise of St. Andrews.
Yes, it was supposed to be 27 holes. I mean, huge course. I thought that's nice, but I can see this one here, and I like your idea of your lot because there's no bonds and so forth. So I offered him $33,000 for the lot, and I got it for $3,500. So, and my biggest mistake was never buying the one next door because he only wanted $25 for it, and I'll buy a car instead. But anyway, the golf course, it was nice. You could walk to it. Bill Dangle was the pro that I remember most. Who was before him?
Mancour.
Who was the pro before?
Mancour was the one I've seen most prominently discussed.
But we had some Fuji Islanders that were the greenskeeper, and they used a lot of water on that course, but it was very plush. And Robert Trent Jones, that design, what's ironic is Robert Trent Jones designed the course, but he put it here, but you could go back east, I think, research it, because I think I read someplace, there's like 40 of that golf course sitting out there. And he's a renowned architect, but I played a course in Paducah, Kansas, that was a Paducah Country Club, and the par 3 hole there was exactly the same as the par 3 hole that's at Silverado, which he designed. I mean, even the oak trees in the same place. So, yeah, he was a great architect, but I think he had 1 or 2 plans, and he just put them in the, he did the same thing over and over again, not discipline. But this course here, everything we said when you played it, it breaks towards railings. That was the comment. And
it breaks towards railings.
But the greens, if you learn how to putt on these greens at Dorado Hills, you can go anywhere, and also be able to read them. And I have golfers that refuse to come out here and play. Says, I can't go up there and play because I can't play your greens. Because the greenskeeper kept those greens really, I mean, we had some good greenskeepers back in the day.
These are the Fijians?
Again?
These are the Fijians?
Yeah, it was Ram Ballet, and then what was his cousin's name that sang? What was oh God, I'm trying to think of his first name. I got pictures and their names back, and again, I need to get my stuff together and give it to you, but I just haven't got it to it.
So, what was the grass denser, or why were the greens unique?
Well, it's really, the greens, well, what is the green?
I'm trying to think of the name of the grass. It's called Seaside Bent.
Seaside what?
Bent, B-E-N-T.
Got it.
And it is the finest green material you can have. It requires a very special environment, a lot of water, and a lot of shade.
A lot of shade?
Yes.
Oh.
And if you played Dorado Hills, you would find that with the front nine, as I recall, the north course, was pretty good because there was a lot of trees. But then the south portion was quite open, and the greens were not the same. And like the third hole was a challenge for everybody. And I know several pro golfers in the area would actually go to Dorado Hills just to play the third hole.
So here's a map, can you guys see it?
Well, now it's covered by
So
that
this is
shadow.
the old thing. So
It's
where?
to the left of the one there.
Up here?
Yeah, see, yeah, and it's obviously before the 5. Keep going. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, there it is.
Well, I heard even the sand and the sand traps was brought in from Pebbles. Because there were some well-placed traps. There's small greens, guarded by a lot of traps, and the course wasn't, keep it straight, otherwise you're in trouble. The lakes were, they actually had a great lake on the par 5, which was, back up. Originally, the front 9 started towards the freeway. That was the original layout, but then they switched it around in later days to starting at the other side of the Serrano Boulevard going north with the par 4, then the par 5. And the par 5 used to have a lake that used to just be about where you could drive. They took it out. It was almost out of bounds, but then there was a big lake on the other side. I think I got on that par 5 maybe twice in my life. The golf course was really one of the reasons. I mean, you saw this when I came here. So what I saw, just like the pool was here. All those amenities, that's why I thought Park Village was the nicest village of all. I mean, they had more upscale houses down in Governor's and so forth, but that was way down there. We're close to
Each
freeway.
progressive village got slightly more upscale models.
Yeah.
But you had air conditioning, everybody had AC from the get-go.
Oh yeah, we had. The one thing we didn't have was natural gas
Yeah.
at that time, and propane.
Well, let's hear from, we got some archers here, very last minute invitation. Thanks so much, guys, for coming out. I appreciate you doing so. What was it like? What was the original configuration and how did it work?
Well, the archery range worked quite well for us. It was the only place you could buy a sandwich up here. Or golf course, I mean.
It was the only place you
Yeah.
could get food.
And why don't you introduce yourselves?
I'm Jim Sweeney. I joined the club in late '64, early '65 on way to peg. We're both life members of the Dorado Hills Archery. Spent a lot of time up here. In the early days, late '60s, early '70s, we would have an annual tournament, and we'd get 300 to 400 people. Then you could park along the road.
Yeah.
A lot of cars parked along there. The property owners here, the people in sales, were tickled to have them there because that exposed another 300 to 400 people to the property here.
Right, right. Plus it made the place look busy and happening and all
And
that.
it did. And
Like he mentioned about the golf course, if you could shoot a good score at El Dorado Hills, you could shoot anywhere else in California or the United States. Because so many side hills and stuff and trying to aim properly, our scores would always go up elsewhere.
Interesting. So, pardon the naivete, but how does the presence of a hill over here affect you shooting at a target here?
it does. You have to take off shooting uphill. You don't take off much shooting downhill. Side hills, it's very difficult to stay plumb. A lot of people hold up an arrow and plumb it to get a feel for the side hill. One thing I wanted to bring up, I wanted to put water up on the range. And I looked into it, and we could have gotten a tap for $1,500. I don't know what it is today, but I understand it's $30,000 or $40,000 for a water tap. One other thing that I can't remember just when it was, but things kind of shut down here, and we understood a shortage of water.
Yeah,
So you sure never know that today with the people who are here compared with there.
yeah. Well, it's been basically a progressive series of ups and downs, the real estate market everywhere, and I think here maybe it was exaggerated a little bit, but interesting. And so tournaments and just regular weekly play.
We had club competition once a month. We had people up here 6, 7 days a week. I was up here every weekend. One other thing that comes to mind, my understanding of getting the property was that the property holders were required to put up 10% of their holdings from permanent greenbelt use. Now, I don't know if that was
Oh, it's 30% now. It was probably 10% or then, or I don't know. That was a long time ago. But it was deeded to you guys. Don't you have a deed?
No, it was Hancock Insurance owned the property, and we had a lease with them. Because I
Got it.
signed that for several years. And then I don't know who they sold it to, but they sold it to somebody
Well,
else.
they sold it to Tony Mansour, and he takes great pride in retaining you on that property.
Excuse me. At one point, they took 1/3 of the range away from us. We were going to build on the ridge, run into serpentine rock, and couldn't build.
Not quite true. They had development rights for those lots, and there were serpentine dust mitigation measures implemented by the county. They relinquished those rights and are currently trying to use those rights in a relatively creative swap of density, which turns out not to be a thing, which is one of the reasons they're struggling to get it approved, over to the other side of El Dorado Hills Boulevard, up on that beautiful hillside, which those of us locally know as the Pedregal property. And so that's all in flux and greatly opposed by the local populace currently. So, but they did have the rights to do that, but they faced a major mutiny of their own residents who had properties adjoining that. Because every one of those lots would have been high-end, extensive grading, custom grading, and on a windy day, you know, I don't know how, anyway, I covered it as a reporter, and it was not a pretty picture. And so they had quietly backed away from their development rights there, which you don't see developers do hardly ever. But you still got. So who owns it now? I mean, what?
CSD.
The property was owned by Parker Brothers, and we leased it from Parker Brothers for many years. And then about 5 years ago, Parker Brothers donated the property to El Dorado Hills CSD.
Oh, so that's
So
right.
CSD now owns the archery range, and we leased the property from CSD. And at one time, they had three different ranges up there. They had the regular range, and they had a Broadhead range, and then they had a range up in the hills, an animal range. And so we lost quite a bit of acreage when they were going to develop up there. They cut us way down.
And what's a broadhead range?
Okay, it's a Broadhead range. Typically on an archery range, you've got bales, straw bales, and you've got paper targets.
Yeah.
Broadhead range is, we have 3D animals. We have a whole bunch of 3D animals. We have an 8-foot tall bear, a couple 7-foot tall elk.
They're like stuff with straw or something that can...
No. These are
They look real.
like they're life size, and they're made out of a foam, a real dense foam.
Yeah.
And we use those for our annual tournament. We have, right now we have 28 targets, anywhere from 10 yards to 80 yards. And so we set up the 3D animals in front of these at our targets. Well, Broadhead targets are also, they look lifelike, like animals, except the Broadhead tip has razor blades on it that is used for killing animals.
Yeah.
So there are special targets they use for the Broadhead. Your standard target is a straight, your standard arrow just has a straight tip,
Yeah.
where your a field tip, where your Broadhead tip has 2 or 3 or even 4 razor blades that's designed for.
And I came upon those when I was illegally hiking up on that ridge several years ago, and I found a couple of them up there that looked like they've been on the ground for many years. So that must have been where they came from.
Well, Dave, tell us about the upper ridge that they have, or the upper targets. How close did we get to the Chinese wall?
We're over it.
Actually, when I do it, there's actually 3 full courses. 14 targets is the course. Shoot 14, and we had 14 on top, and we have 14 on the left. And actually, we had 14 in Broadhead turn way to the right of the range. And what the difference is with the Broadhead range is it's unmarked yardage. So you got to walk up and you actually have to guess the distance.
Ah.
See, most of the targets are marked for the yard. We're having that Broadhead league right now at our range right now. So it's unmarked, so you get up and you guess it. You usually shoot 2 arrows. And
So you guys don't have like lasers built into your bows and stuff to do all that?
Well, there's a lot of stuff there with the bows, but you can't do it. The idea of the Broadhead league is just for hunting. We have before the season, just to guess the distance.
Yeah.
When I first started, I remember the range in 1980, actually in front of the range there were steps went up over the fence and onto the range that way. Yeah, I remember that was a long time ago. And actually, back probably 30 years ago, I actually taught archery there for the CSD when Delta Gamble was kind of running it down there.
Cool.
And actually on top of the ridge was my target, which was probably, there's 14 targets to, you shoot 14 targets, that's 1 round. Now on top of the range, I think target, I think that was 18 or 19. And actually they called we called that the rattlesnake wall. The Chinese wall is up there. There's actually a gold mine up there. I don't know that it was a big old hole was in the ground up there. You know, I'm sure there's gold in this area here.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's a lot of gold on that ridge.
Oh yeah.
But there was an actual asbestos mine.
Oh, was it really?
There, yeah, they mined asbestos there. Yeah, it's on some old maps, you'll see it. But there's probably evidence of gold mining there as well. I know George Wielden in his geology of the gold country class talks about pulling like a coffee can full of gold out of New York Creek when he was here on some project. So there's, yeah, that's the West Bear Mountain Fault that is that, and it is full of gold and asbestos, naturally occurring asbestos.
Well, right now, we've got a lease with CSD, and Parker Brothers wants to buy the property back. They want the property back to develop into homes. And they would like the archery range to move over to Marble Valley. And they asked if we were interested. I said, we have absolutely no interest in moving. We like where we're at.
Good.
And so right now we've got 28 targets, anywhere from, like I said, 10 yards to 80 yards. And it's good exercise because you're walking uphill, downhill.
Yeah.
And we built a new club. We've always had a clubhouse there, to my knowledge. They had a small clubhouse. We tore that down and built a a new one.
See, that's news to me. If you've got a clubhouse, you've got
It's
it pretty well tucked away.
It's as big as this in here.
It's about the size of this room. We built a new clubhouse about 4 or 5 years ago. And
Do you guys know this?
Where is it?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously have to hike there, right?
No, you can see it from the road, really. Side
yeah,
view.
you can see it from the road, not real clearly. You have to look for it
Yeah.
because it's in amongst the trees. And we get a lot of use out of that. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, we had a CSD members came out on a Monday, and there were 35 CSD employees that came out and shot the range. That didn't shoot the whole range, but they learned how to shoot archery. We had our instructor there.
Yeah, I thought.
Okay, we teach classes for Dorado Hills CSD once a month. And you sign up, and you get that local newspaper that gives you the activities.
Yeah, the activity guide.
You sign up, the kids sign up through there, and we have an instructor, and Dave's an assistant instructor up there. And it's a well-run program, and it's well attended by the local kids. But the CSD employees really enjoyed it. A lot of them hadn't been up there before. They really enjoyed the archery. And we ended up with a couple of new members from that. We currently have about 250 memberships. But that's deceiving because I'm a member and Dave's a member, but you and your wife and 3 kids shoot. That's only one membership, but there's 5 shooters there. So we've got probably 325 shooting members, and then we're open to the public. So when you see the cars parked out down below by the painted rocks, those are non-members who come up and they're supposed to pay a fee and they can shoot all day if they want.
For $5.
And we've got a 10 and 20 yard practice area where we teach classes, but we also have a 30 through 80 yard practice range. You can see that from the road.
Cool. So, what's on the honor system on the $10 or?
$5.
Honor system, and sometimes we have to remind people you didn't pay. Oh, I forgot to pay.
Cheapskates.
A lot of them do. You'd be surprised.
And so, what about those rocks? Those became sort of an icon. There was one initially, and then there was 2 after 9/11.
It's actually across the road originally.
Both of them?
No, one of them was over there. Then he moved that one over.
Yeah, because they didn't want to paint over the 9/11 one.
And after 9/11, they put a second rock in there.
Right. So, do you have any, other than the rock area being a certifiable toxic waste site with all the paint that's been dumped into the ground there? And if you go behind that rock, the dried paint's like this thick.
Yeah.
It's terrible. But do those you ever shoot any kids or anything?
No.
No.
Originally, that traffic light is fairly new. And the entrance to the range used to be just opposite Olson. And when they put the traffic light in, they moved the entrance. So now you have to come in and make a horseshoe turn to the right and another horseshoe to go up the hill.
Now with golf, I know that if you're out there, it's hot, you're with your friends, the temptation is to bring a cooler and maybe sip a cold one as you go. And I know that some golfers say they get actually better at first, and then by the 16th, 17th hole, it goes the other way. Is there a similar phenomenon in archery?
No, we don't. No alcohol out on the range.
No smoking.
No smoking.
For obvious reasons.
Especially the smoking.
Do you know how they got to the 18 holes in golf? Where
No.
it started from? He probably knows.
Well, 18 holes, there's 18 shots in a bottle of scotch.
That's what it was, 18
And you
shots.
had 18. And if you really want it, you go on Google YouTube video of Robin Williams' golf skit and just Google it. And it's an excellent take on golf. But it can't be shown in public.
I'd like to share a quick story with you about
Please.
We used to have beer stands all around the range. We had a big beer stand at the registration area. First thing in the morning, before you actually get started, we have practice. Because of so many people, we shoot from the 20-yard line. One morning, this is 8:30 before we started, guy's back at the 40-yard line, putting an arrow in his bow. I went over there and asked him what he was going to do, and he said, well, I can shoot over those folks up there. This guy could barely stand. Needless to say, we sent him home.
Larry, you said you were going to talk about the newcomers a little bit. Your wife's been active forever.
Yeah, my wife was the president of the newcomers. She was the 8th president. What it was, the newcomers was by far the most organized group that we had in El Dorado Hills. I mean, it's incredible. Every president got a book like this with a plaque on it, and every single thing that they did is in the newcomers book. And they had a huge thing. My wife was the 8th president of it, and going along with your theme here about recreation is that if you look at the first 8 that were in the group that were the presidents, 3 of them, you see 1, 2, 3, yeah, the last 3 before my wife started the Bunko group here, which still exists. And interestingly enough, that group of 12 ladies exists today. And they meet every month. And then one of them is, 2 of them have passed away. But it's incredible how that group with the ladies held, this area together.
That's the kind of stuff that now they're doing studies, and they find that people that have those kind of connections are healthier and live longer and are, more satisfied with their life.
But I tell you, I mean this, and I've lived here, since '66 and bought my home in '64, and I am here to tell you that this place would have died without somebody like the group like the Newcomers Club. That there's no way that you could tie this family here together if you didn't have the Newcomers Club. And then the other club, as you mentioned, was the golf club. I mean, we have like 500 members in that. Yeah. And if you want to get the message out in El Dorado Hills, you made sure you got to the Newcomers Club and you got to the golf club. And then you had a very high Facebook. that was our Facebook.
Garden Club also was very active, but all those, as Larry said, if you wanted to get the word out, the Garden Club, the Newcomers, the Golf Club, and then the other was our swim team, the Taz. I mean, that was that was hooked in with the PTA from the schools, but the Taz swimming club, which is now overexpanded. There's more than one swimming club here in El Dorado Hills. Back when we were first here in the late '60s, they were begging to get kids to go there. And my son, I told him, "You got to go swim. There's nobody else to do it." Of course, there was nobody else to compete against, so he always got a first prize too, which was nice. But not anymore. There's a waiting list.
A reporter who replaced me at the Village Life was telling me apparently there was a very inspirational swimming coach here in the late 60s, early 70s that really built that program up and got, I guess, Steve Weir, who's now the head of he was Oak Ridge principal and now he's head of the district. He was working under this guy, and he came from Germany. He coached the Olympic team in Germany. And there's a whole big history here of this guy that Julie wants me to tell. Bridge, anybody?
Keep looking at me with the bridge.
Yeah.
I started bridge in Newcomers.
Got it.
And played bridge there. And then we branched out with other groups in El Dorado Hills. So I belonged at one time to 9 groups, and about half of them were newcomers. So bridge was big. I don't belong to that many now, only 4. So, but I was waiting for you to get to the horses.
Yeah, well, I haven't got to the horses because I don't see a lot of public horse stuff here, but there's some non-public.
There was.
Well, tell us about it, lady.
Well, I had the horse ranch down on Salmon Falls, but I used to ride my horse down El Dorado Hills Boulevard on the dirt, up through Governors, onto Ridgeview, which was dirt, down to Patterson, which was paved, tie my horse up to my friend's split rail fence and go in and have lunch. then I would ride my horse back. So, yeah, there was riding up here, but we used to have trail rides out of the ranch, and maybe 30 or more horses. And our ranch was right on the lake, so we just went out the back gate and went into Browns Ravine Road.
So there was some equestrian social stuff.
Just what was at our ranch.
Yeah.
And all. But they were local. Peggy Christensen, I don't know if anybody knows Peggy. She's been here. Her husband, Ken, runs the Brown Ravine Marina. And they've been here. I didn't get here until '73, but they were well established here before I got here. She's a horse person. And there were a lot of horse people around. This is in the '70s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then boating, of course, we sailed and skied on Folsom Lake because it's right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that should just get stronger now with all the billions of dollars worth of stuff that we don't have to drain the lake all the way down every summer, and that should extend the boating season as well as provide better flood protection, I guess. Is there anybody else here have anything? Art, what did you do?
What did I do?
Yeah, when you came to Dorado Hills, what did you do? Just hang out with this guy at the golf course?
I was here before Dorado Hills, downtown Latrobe, and I was a member of the golf course here. I can remember when the main highway went through White Rock and Parksville and all the rest of that. But other than that, I haven't really nothing. Though there's one thing about the development, it hasn't anything to do with sports. But one thing that the design of this subdivision did that was unique. They put the water pump in, they got a water right at Folsom Lake, put the water treatment plant down at that end of the subdivision, built the sewage plant down here, and those were put in first with lines connecting them, then the development went.
Which Lindsay later on said was a big mistake.
Well, but it maybe from a cost standpoint, but it did give them water and sewage right from day one.
And he also claims to have gotten the first water rights out of Folsom Lake, prior to Folsom or Orangevale. And he got something like 700,000 acre-feet, just a massive amount, all conditioned on this explosion of growth, which his whole financial model was predicated upon, and didn't happen. And then they were going to lose like 90% of it, and Mansour came in and did something when he showed up to save, I think it's about a third of that. Which, of course, was EID's water by then. But it took some doing. It was putting everything underground, was, nobody had done it before.
In fact, that was a big selling point.
Exactly.
Everything, all underground utilities.
There was one other thing he did that was not in the requirements of El Dorado County. He put curb and gutter in from day one.
Drainage.
Yeah, well, in a hilly terrain, I would think that it would be kind of,
Well, Cameron Park did not have it and still doesn't have curb and gutter.
Well, those of you that were here early, when you look at the history of Cameron Park, which I've done a little bit of as well, I mean, they're doing a golf course in the same time frame, and Larry Cameron's, fighting some of the same fights that Lindsay is, but Lindsay seems to be fighting it up here. He was trying to do far more than Larry Cameron. And Cameron similarly struggled and was gone not that long after he started. And then other people actually were responsible for the Cameron Park that we know today. And I would just love to know how neck and neck was that competition. I mean, there was definitely a period where Cameron Park was the place to be and not El Dorado Hills, but before very long, El Dorado Hills became more of a prestigious...
Well, Cameron Park, of course, was below the snow and above the fog. That was their sales pitch.
Right, and we still get fog, a significant amount of fog in El Dorado Hills from the... Yeah.
Oh, and there's another thing about Alan Lindsay. When he left this development, he had property across the Weber Creek from Camino.
Yeah.
And he and his brother went in and developed that something or other.
Camino del Sol.
And it's a private
subdivision, but he ran equipment on that, and he told me I enjoy this much more than suede shoes down in El Dorado Hills.
And he told George Wheeldon that he recovered the entire cost of the infrastructure out of gold from operating that heavy equipment along Weber Creek. That they took gold out of there, a lot of gold out of it.
You know, I think this kind of gets back to my point about the Newtown sort of. Cameron Park never got organized.
No, they never
The
came
people
together.
there's no way that the people in Cameron Park can really be part of a large organization.
Because
Because
they tried to do the CSD, but their politics gone so south that it's very divisive. And this CSD, despite some high-profile divisiveness, for most of the time of its existence, has been pretty good, well-functioning machine. Thank you, Wayne Lowry, for some of that, I think.
But like about the 80, I don't know the exact year, but around 1980, Cameron Park was owned by the people that belonged to Cameron Park, not by anybody else.
Yeah.
So it went from part of Cameron Park with Larry Cameron to a completely separate organization, and they didn't care. I mean, you know, and they just set the requirements of what you had to do around the golf course. Okay,
Yeah.
and that was the extent of it. And all I really said was you couldn't put a fence.
Yeah, and so what you see in El Dorado Hills is the result of far more effective master planning, even though the plans have been regurgitated, reformulated, and the villages aren't as distinct as they used to be and all that. There's still a lot of that here. Both communities, and I sat and as a reporter covered the community development meetings in both communities suffer by bifurcation. There's a freeway that cuts them in half. And so it's without a geographical center, it's tough. El Dorado Hills had the town center and the Raley Center, which was sort of two more substantial things that people actually related to as a town center. But Cameron Park, neither side of the freeway, ever seems to have actually, and I don't live there, but the sense I got, because there was some very high-minded folks that were trying desperately to get somebody to make some central town center there, but they didn't have big developers willing to spend the money to do it, which in El Dorado Hills there has been from the early, the evil big developers have built this place and put the front money to make the things that are here and to provide the sense of community that there is.
This was the first planned community west of the Mississippi. And Gruen's plan was the foundation.
Yeah, that's a conditional statement, but yeah. It was. It was a high-minded thing, and if you look, and Mansour will tell you that he really just fine-tuned it. But, I mean, I would love to know the story, for example, when St. Andrews Golf Course hit the cutting room floor. That must have been an ugly day because all those people that bought lots, they bought fairway lots, and there's no fairway. What's up? I mean, there must have been a lawsuit at some point. I mean, I can't imagine.
There wasn't. It just happened.
Yeah. And
It's just like the second golf course up at Serrano. He was supposed to put in a second golf course. But what killed this golf course, in my opinion, was when Parker no longer wanted to be in the golf course business and gave Serrano to the membership. He had no other interest in running this golf course, and it was nothing but a field he would love to develop, which he's trying to do, of course.
Yeah.
Well, I have several friends that actually worked with up there at Serrano and the golf course, and the word also was out that they were getting. I mean, they were selling out golf times down in El Dorado Hills, and they were having trouble with membership and sustaining the cost of sustaining Serrano Country was huge, and they just couldn't get the members. And I know they were also saying, well, if we shut down El Dorado Hills, we'll get a whole bunch of golfers just jump up there with the opportunity to play Serrano. Never happened. Never happened. If there was 10% of the El Dorado Hills group went up there, I'd be surprised.
Well, the other phenomenon that I see in my looking at the history of El Dorado Hills is there were stubborn visionaries. Lindsay wanted the sewer and the water in place before he was selling houses. He just did. And so he didn't care, you know, practicality be damned, this is what I'm going to do. Mansour was similarly stubborn, and Parker is also stubborn. He does not want to do anything. They've got this saying, Parker perfect, that's not for public consumption, but here we are putting it on the table. I mean, the backs of the signs are painted. Everything's done to a certain standard, and even when the money runs tight, he doesn't want to back off of that because he wants to be playing up here at this level, which, you know, is a marketing branding thing that is well known and a good idea. But when times get tight, it's hard to stick to your guns. So sometimes you got to get out of the unprofitable business if you want to still be making homes a certain way, is the way I read that. But I don't know.
Yeah, you know, there was also a teaching golf course up at Cameron Park, and it was the Arnold Palmer course.
Oh, that's right, Arnold Palmer.
And Arnold Palmer would be there regularly, okay, and he'd fly in his jet and land at the airport, and then he'd go there. And
Well, Cameron was a really charismatic guy. He loved hanging out with celebrities. And Lindsay was a diminutive character. I mean, he was more comfortable hanging out with Bell at the 76 station than he was attracting celebrities.
But you can see the difference of somebody who really plans the community. You know, you can look up at Cameron Park, and you can look at Dorado Hills, and it's like night and day of, you know, the community effect. It's crazy. It's I mean, I've really gotten to know Cameron Park in the 20 years I've been a member up there. Man, there's no comparison.
So Lindsay buys 11,000 acres here.
Yeah.
And eventually, El Dorado Hills is about 9,600 of that. And he says that most of it he got for like $300 an acre. I mean, it was cheap because it was sit and fallow. Ranching had died way down, the price of beef and all that. And he was arguing that it was going to all develop hodgepodge and be a train wreck if somebody didn't do this. It might as well be me because I know what to do and I know who to get in here. So at one point, we don't want to be told we can't put in a plastic fence if we want to because it's our property, darn it. And at the other end, we see the need for planning up here at this level. And so somewhere in the middle is the appropriate ground where it works and is important and contributes to community. And so where is that ground is the question.
Well, that was one of the other things when I bought my lot here. We had CC&Rs. I was familiar with CC&Rs. In fact, we've had CC&Rs in California for a long, long time before there was any boat planning. There was no general plan required until after the 70s. I think 67 was when the general plan was
No,
required.
there were area plans before that.
But
general plan came much later.
there was no planning requirement. We had a subdivision map act that only how to get a map approved, but didn't have anything to do with it.
And we've got plenty of evidence of what happens with zero planning. I mean, that's where I live in Placerville. At the end of a 10-foot road, that if a big fire ever breaks out, just call me a marshmallow and stick me over on a stick, because there's no way out, and it's 10 feet wide. If there's a fire engine coming down, there ain't nobody going on.
You know, the thing is that whatever the governing organization is, El Dorado Hills has its own unofficial governing organization, and that's the people. Okay, and the best thing was when we fought the gas problem here with Unigas, and everybody was upset about their rate. I'm telling you, the whole community overnight got together in these town hall meetings. Hundreds of people would show up, and we drove them out in a matter of a couple months. You know, so it's kind of like the community has always had the spirit of organization by the people, and it works.